Okay, so hello and welcome to this week's CCMA online seminar. Very pleased you could join us. Hopefully you got a cup of tea and maybe you're having your lunch with us today. So today we're going to be looking at driving value from customer satisfaction within the contact centre, and delighted to have ServiceNow and Capita join us. But before we crack on with content, there's a couple of things that I'd just like to share with you first. So first of all, I'm Lee Hopwood. I'm the CEO here at the CCMA, and we've got some exciting things coming up. And in particular, on Monday we have the virtual ceremony for the UK National Contact Centre Awards. Unfortunately, we're not at the brewery this year for all of the obvious reasons, but please join us at 7 o'clock on Monday, the 21st of September. That's this coming Monday. We will be releasing the link to join us tomorrow, so look out for that on online channels. It's going to be streamed via YouTube, so hopefully you can join us. Okay, we've also got a few other things coming up. So for our members, we've got a couple of special interest group meetings coming up, one on quality and one for the complaints management. So if you're a member, then please do sign up for those. We've also got coming up on the 3rd of November, the conference, and there'll be more details shared around that in the next day or so. One of the other things we've been doing a lot of in recent weeks is growing our training offering, and there are a number of new training courses available to you, both members and non-members. Our members obviously get a discounted rate. But creating a great team, one of the great things there is that you do get a personal behaviour assessment, which is always an interesting read, and Emotive CX for customer interaction, and that's a virtual session with Martin Hill-Wilson. So there's more on our website, so please go and check those out. So back to today's session, and looking forward to introducing you to Ian Ashby, who is Principal Strategist for Customer Service at ServiceNow, and Simon Brunga from Capita. So first of all, Ian. So Ian has been working with organisations to help them transform their customer service operations for quite a few years. And in fact, he has led his team to achieve 2 Stevie Awards for customer service in the past. So we've certainly got an expert in the room there. And he's from ServiceNow, and who is ServiceNow? Well, they are one of the leading cloud-native software vendors. They've been awarded by Forbes as the most innovative company in the world, and they are probably best known for their IT and enterprise service management software. So they will claim to be the undisputed #1 globally. You may well know them more from their UK-based customer service management customers, who some of you may well be in the room. So they work with Lloyds Bank, the Post Office, the NHS, BT, Unilever. So they work with some great names. Also joining us, thank you Ian and Simon for joining us. And also we have Simon Brunga, who is the Divisional Support Director for Capita Software. And Simon has spent the last 20 years of his experience in customer support and contact centres. So very much undisputed, another expert in the room. But in particular, for the last 2 years, he's been working on the transformation of the customer support operations at Capita Software. So delighted to have you on board today, Simon. And Capita Software is one of the 6 divisions of the Capita Group. It's the consulting digital services and software business, and they manage 100 million customer conversations each year. And what that means is that every day, over half the population of the UK comes into contact with Capita in some way, whether you realise it or not. So I think that's really interesting. Okay, so we know who our experts are, and let me now explain how this is going to work. So we have 4 questions that we have posed to Ian and to Simon. And with each question, we are going to hear from Ian at ServiceNow, his response, and then I'll have a brief chat with Simon to see how Capita have responded to each of these questions. So the 4 questions are: why excellent customer service in the contact centre really matters. Then we'll look at what drives a compelling customer experience in the contact centre. Then we'll look at the different approaches to measuring and tracking customer satisfaction in contact centers before finishing on how to use customer feedback to drive business performance improvements, which is obviously where we intend to get to. So first of all, I'm going to hand you over to Ian. Please take us through why excellent customer service in the contact center really matters.
Lee, thanks very much. Just checking that you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes.
Very good. Very good to be here, and thanks for the intro. Really appreciate it. Delighted to share some of, if you like, mine and indeed ServiceNow's perspective on, I think, what is a very interesting topic, and obviously going to be really good to hear what Simon's perspective is and hearing from Capita and Capita Software. So where do I think this sort of comes from? I think the contact center really is right at the heart of an organization's customer service operations. But it is a subset of customer service, and indeed a subset of the overall customer experience, the other components that go into that, obviously, you know, beyond, if you like, the service component, the whole life cycle of the customer journey, if you will. But the contact center is very much, if you like, the bullseye in the middle that sets the context and the scene for the rest of the operation. And it, you know, it is a very important component to what a lot of organizations talk about trying to drive customer centricity in terms of their operations and their outlook. I think the interesting thing here is that you get your customers satisfied with the contact center or the call center experience, it starts to influence and drive through into all those other areas. So it really is the kernel that creates, if you like, the, you know, the core for the operation and starts to drive, hopefully in a positive way, the customer service experience, the overall customer experience, and then that cultural thing around customer centricity. And of course, I think it's relevant as well, whether that's purely around service and support, whether that's about sales, whether it's inbound or outbound, all of those different components. So I think that's the sort of starting point around, you know, where does the contact center fit? Right at the middle, influencing out. It's not the entire piece, but it's a very, very important piece of the overall customer experience and customer centricity sort of component within the culture of the organization. Why does this really matter? Fundamentally, it's around driving the revenue. Obviously, getting happy customers so that you retain them, or in some cases they renew the subscription or service or maintenance contract or whatever it is that they have. Beyond that, if you've kept them, then you have the ability to do what is often called enrichment, or if you prefer, cross-sell and upsell. And if you've also done that, then you can have a loyal advocate, if you will, that can then act as a reference for you to help you get new customer acquisition. So you get this kind of three components of the revenue that's driven by a positive customer experience, or if you wish the other way, you know, a poor customer experience means you're going to have higher churn rates. You're not going to get people to buy additional services and products. They're not going to be a reference to help you to add in. So it's both sides of that coin. It's all around driving the revenue component, and that's a big piece of why organizations think about customer experience and customer satisfaction. But actually, it's a little bit more complicated even than that. It's not an island. You've got customer experience and satisfaction very closely linked to employee engagement and satisfaction. And actually, I think you can close that loop into things like cost and productivity and efficiency. And a number of people talk about this. Gartner call this the connected ecosystem, for example, with those three components. And I think it's a very interesting sort of play when you think this through a little bit. Very often we see organizations that are looking to try and drive some improvements in costs and productivity. Things like self-service, getting to digital channels, trying to get portals, using, you know, chatbots for some of the simpler sort of transactions and interactions and so on. So it starts off really around let's reduce costs, let's improve productivity, improve efficiency. But actually, if you think about that, so many customers actually want that type of self-service experience. They want to be able to do things 24/7. They don't want to wait in line. If they can do things simply, you know, changing a password, getting how-to guides, you know, updating their contact details, etc., they'd much rather do that online rather than waiting to actually speak to someone. So actually, that what started off as a cost reduction can actually drive an improved experience. And the good news for the employees, particularly those in the contact center, is take away those mundane, boring, repetitive tasks. You know, password resets. You know, change my contact details. You know, how do I you know, reboot my PC? Whatever it happens to be. Actually, the employees are happier and you know have you know, more time to do other things, which in itself then starts to drive customer experience. There's a great comment that one of my colleagues has about happy hens lay more eggs. Happy employees absolutely drive a better customer experience. So again, you started off with a cost-driven activity that starts to drive through into a better customer experience. And by the way, happy employees do not leave. You don't have to recruit, you don't have to train and onboard. You know, you save all of those costs, you retain those employees, and that in turn improves your costs and productivity situation. So you have what I call the multiplier effect from all these elements together through this connected ecosystem. And you start to see some of the things through from people like McKinsey saying, get this right, that, you know, one activity carefully done can drive both improvements in customer satisfaction, improvements in employee satisfaction, and reduce costs. So you've got a really strong driver here around the whole economic component by connecting these pieces together. So why does excellent customer service in the contact center really matter? Well, I think it's all about the numbers. You know, it's all about the revenue, but also, of course, the costs and the profits. And it's thinking through the implications in a positive way for the customers, for the employees, and the shareholders that are going to get those direct benefits from for the financial benefits that you're delivering through delivering an excellent customer service. So that was my sort of starting point, if you like, Lee.
Thank you, Ian, and great starting point. And so, Simon, you've been leading a major transformation at Capita Software for the last couple of years. What's really been the driver for you in that? I'm guessing that it's related to some of what we've just heard.
Thanks, Lee. There was some great stuff there from me, and I particularly like, you know, the customer at the heart of that bullseye. I think it's so easy to lose track of that, and I think that's potentially what, you know, we might have done at Capita Software before this transformation. Why we embarked on this transformation really was we had a really complicated, fragmented service. We had, you know, 26 different service desks that people using Capita Software could contact. So we really wanted to simplify and consolidate, you know, what we were doing. And you know, the key driver was to delight our customers. That's what we all want. We're all customer facing folk, and that's what we want to do. We want to do a good job. We want to give our customers that great experience. And I think we lost track a little bit of that. There's a lot of focus on developing new products, new shiny products. We've got to sell this, you know. But to Ian's point, you know, if people aren't happy with the service, they're unlikely to, you know, buy new products. You know, it's harder to keep them on the existing products. So I think that was hugely important. So the main drivers for us really were, you know, to simplify, consolidate, move everyone over onto one simple point of contact. Not if you had multiple products, you had multiple different phone numbers to use. We wanted to move away from all of that and to standardize that customer experience, and equally our agent experience as well, because it was sort of no fun for those guys either, you know, having to deal with all of this. So I suppose those were the main drivers for our transformation.
And so before you did the transformation, what were the challenges with measuring customer satisfaction?
Well, it just wasn't happening in any coordinated way. You know, the way I looked at it, it was, you know, once a year the marketing guys would send out this really complicated, long survey, questionnaire, and to me, it was going to the wrong people. You know, these surveys were going to all sorts of different people in commercial and sales and all. You know, we wanted to know what our end users, our customers were feeling about the survey. And once a year survey, you might get the results from that passed down to marketing 2 months after people have filled in this survey, if you were lucky. You know, and that's too late. It's too, you know, you're looking in the review mirror all the time. So that was, you know, the main complications. There was hardly any decent feedback coming back. So you were just, you know, guessing. You had a gut instinct about things, but you didn't really have any hard interactions with your customers, if you like.
And it's like you say, it's looking in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely.
You can make some changes, but the world has moved on a little bit.
Yeah,
by
so
the time
fast.
Data.
Absolutely. You know, with all modern technology and tooling now, yeah, it's too late, too reactive. We wanted to be more proactive about these things.
And so how important was CSAT and understanding that process in doing this transformation?
Well, it was hugely important. We needed to understand, rather than a gut feel, what the end customers were feeling about things. We needed to measure it on a daily basis, to be quite honest. So NPS was a big one that we identified, but it wasn't the only one. Too much previously, we were relying on SLA performance and those sort of metrics. And I'm not saying those aren't important, but just because you're hitting the SLAs doesn't necessarily mean the customers are happy. So NPS was a big one, as well as other factors like are our agents pleasant and experienced and knowledgeable, all that good sort of stuff as well. But overall NPS score was important.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Simon. Ian, back to you.
So going to your second question, Lee, this is really about what drives a compelling customer experience in the contact center. And this is a little bit of a sort of thesis of mine that I wanted to share with the guys. And I'm really interested to see what Simon thinks around this. I think it's all about what I call consumer. And this is nothing to do with COVID. This is something that's existed pre that, but it's really around consumer experiences driving the expectations for what should be the sort of customer experience that people experience. And let me sort of explain that in a little bit more detail. I think if you look back, say 15 years ago, what was the consumer experience? And I've chosen sort of 4 things here. It's the, going out shopping to the mall, it's going to the cinema to watch a film, it's, reading a book, hailing a cab or whatever. And just under 15 years ago, something happened. There was this little thing, this very small thing that happened out there, which was the launch of the iPhone, and with it on the back of that, the iPad and other smartphones and devices and so on and so forth. And to me, that was a really critical moment in time, and really everything changed, because now, not exclusively, but in large part now, those experiences have changed dramatically. You've got your Amazons and your ASOSes as your online shopping. You've got the over-the-top players that are delivering things like Netflix and Disney Plus in terms of the capability and the ability to watch those from home. And actually, if you think about it, therefore the death of Blockbuster, which if you like was the alternative work from home kind of arrangement, because it's now a digital version rather than the physical version of the tapes or the CDs or the DVDs or whatever. Things like Kindles and iPads, and people then consuming, newspapers and books and so on those. And of course, the one that everyone has talks about, the Ubers and the other hailing apps that you have, with mobile phones for taxis and so on. So those things, if you like, I would say are sort of the leaders and classic consumer experiences. And we've got to use and love and enjoy those, for the convenience and the capabilities that they deliver us, and, make it easier, make it quicker, wherever we want, all of those good things. Knowing that the taxi is 3 minutes away, just turning around the roundabout, etc. All of those things that we've just come to expect as kind of normal. So to me, that set the frame really around, what we expect. And we are all consumers. We're all doing this stuff, right? Maybe not all of it and every day, but all of us have experienced at least one, if not all of these things, and therefore have that expectation of how things can be, okay? So to me, if you like, that consumer experience drives the expectation that they have when they're dealing with other, if you like, vendors, other suppliers. So, those best in class, and I think they are best in class consumer experience, impact on what we expect, or you might say demand, in a couple of different ways and so on. So the first is in our personal lives, for all the other suppliers, we have that expectation that we want that type of experience we're getting from those names and those sort of scenarios that I described before. So that's the business to consumer, customer experience, if you will. It even spills over into public sector organizations, where, we talk about the citizen experience, if you like, the business to citizen experience that we expect. Why is it that I have to go and queue up at a town hall to do something? Why can't I get, my driving license renewed online? Why do I have to, send stuff in and print something off and sign it and post it and all this kind of stuff? Why can't I do that sort of stuff, much easier in our personal lives? And when we're working, you know, from all those suppliers, those vendors and partners that we deal with, it's like, well, why can't it be like it, you know, it is when I'm working with Amazon, or, you know, I'm working with other online shopping, etc. Why do I have to go through this really difficult, complicated process to interact with you? Why am I sending you an email and waiting for you to respond? And, you know, you say you're going to take 8 days to respond to my email. What, you know, why is that the case? Why can't we have interactive chat? Why can't we do, you know, things in a better way? And also, you know, why have I got this clunky system that takes forever, that's green screen, that, you know, I'm having to do what we call swivel chair, you know, re-entry things in different parts, etc. Why is it, you know, why is it too hard? The employee experience as well is impacted, because we know it can be better than that. So to me, that consumer experience is impacting on the business to consumer customer experience. It's impacting on the business to business customer experience and the employee experience. And my final point on this is, I deliberately didn't say at home and at work, because that has blurred as well. We all know that during these times, you know, we do some personal stuff during the working day. You know, many of us are working from home, so it's not even about a physical location anymore. There's another dynamic here about what it is we happen to be doing at a point in time. So again, that blurs things even more. So, you know, we might be during our lunch hour doing a quick shop on Amazon, and that reinforces the bit about, hang on a minute, I come back into my working environment, my working relationships, my working systems, and frankly, I don't like it, you know, and I can think about, you know, that might be one of the reasons why I might actually think about leaving the organization. So that's kind of my my thesis. Now, if you sort of take that, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but these are the sort of things that come out of that. There's really good research that you can see out there from people like KPMG, Nunwood, you know, Accenture and Gartner and so on and so forth. And this is kind of how I boil it down, is these are the sorts of consumer expectations that you would have to deliver on those things that you get from those other best-in-class experiences. It's things like reduce the time and effort, make it easy for me, you know, set expectations, get personalized delivery of solutions and context, you know, have a really good empathetic relationship and discussion. So that's a really important component around your agents and their training and selection, etc. Rapid resolution, just fix it quickly. And then building trust, a really key component that I think, you know, gets into data security and a whole bunch of things. So those are the sorts of things that people are expecting now in customer experiences, whether that's business to consumer or business to business.
Thank you, Ian. So Simon, back to you. I've got a question for you. Do you agree with Ian that consumerization of the customer experience is a big driver for what Capita's customers are looking for? And is that what they're expecting from you?
I absolutely agree. I mean, you know, the world's moved on, isn't it? Customers are much more demanding now. They're much more likely to push back when they don't like, you know, service. I mean, if you go back, you know, maybe 5-10 years, you know, it was, well, this is what you get and you can take it or leave it type. You can't get away with that anymore. People will just up sticks and walk to another supplier, you know. You think any service you like, people change electricity, your phones, whatever, you know, there's always someone there to you know, to take that business. And with those other experiences that Ian was mentioned, you know, particularly like the one about, you know, cabs. When can I expect this to? Where is my cab? It's like the pizza thing, isn't it? It's right, the guy's making it, it's in the oven, it's, you know, it's nearly, you know, it's when can I get my issue resolved? People, especially some of the more complicated things, people understand that this might take more time to fix, but give me some expectations. Whereabouts is it in the resolution cycle, you know, and to be able to give them that some sort of information, that's where you can nip some of these complaints in you know, and criticisms in the bud. So you know, I think it's a great point. Yeah, totally agree.
No, that's interesting. I too agree. But what particular features or capabilities, I guess, have you been therefore implementing in your transformation that do actually deliver that more compelling customer experience? What have you been doing?
So we put a lot of time and effort into our customer portal and to our knowledge bases. As I say before, we had a very fragmented service, different places to go. Customers now have an appetite for self-serve. So if we can get customers you know, well, something's broke. If your washing machine's broke, where do you go now? You go to Google and you Google it, you know, and I think, well, I'll have a go myself. And we wanted to get a lot of that information and knowledge out there easily for customers. We didn't want to make that the be all end all. You could still contact us, pick up the phone, whatever you wanted to do. But if we've got all these other channels now where we can pass that information to customers and make it much more easy, there's a lot of knowledge out there in our customers, particularly Capita software customers. It's quite specialist type of stuff, and some of our end users are some of our greater advocates. They love helping customers and colleagues. So we've set up communities and forums and that sort of thing where people can get online and help each other, share best practice, all that good stuff. And we're putting a lot of time and energy into developing that, because we see that as a great springboard for great customer service, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simon. Ian, back to you for question 3 on different approaches to measuring and tracking customer satisfaction in contact centres.
Thanks, Lee, and thanks, Simon. I think a really interesting perspective about, you know, what you guys have been trying to do to get into those digital channels and so on that you were describing there. So now I get into some of the detail of my own experience, and also what I've seen other organisations do in terms of how they go about actually measuring and tracking their customer satisfaction. And we're also going to try and do a couple of polls in this as well, just to see what organisations are doing out there that are listening in today. So measuring and tracking customer satisfaction, I sort of break this down into really sort of 3/4 chunks. The first is around the trigger for the survey. So if you sort of take the middle bit, the periodic one, sometimes called the voice of the customer, that's the thing that Simon was describing earlier on, maybe going out once a year, you know, going to a broad suite of people, not just those that are interacting with the contact center, perhaps those that have got commercial relationships, maybe contractual relationships, you know, the purchasing type of thing as well. You know, that's a core component, as opposed to more transactional stuff, and actually contact centers and support and service work very well on a transactional basis. So after there has been an interaction, you know, sending out a survey to say, how did we do, you know, what are we doing, and come back to how you measure that later on. You can also have an arrangement where actually you allow your customer to sort of say, I want to give you feedback, you know, enabling the ability through, for example, a portal or something like that. And that could be, you know, right, you know, give us your feedback here, as opposed to prompting them through sending them a text or sending them a WhatsApp or an email or whatever to actually start the transaction type activity. And of course, you can do all of these or combine them or have a mix or whatever, but those are the sort of things that we see out there, the different triggers that people typically use for going out to actually start the process of gathering the customer satisfaction feedback, if you will. A key component of it is the metrics. Things like the CSAT measures, so whether that's on a sort of a 5 scale, a 7 scale, or 11 scale. So what do I mean by that? So on a 5 scale, it would be kind of like, there's 5 sort of choices, if you like, between, you know, very, very good, good, neutral, poor, and very poor, you know, and obviously you can extend that to 7 or extend that to 11. If you use a 0 to 10 scale, there's actually 11 different things that you could be doing on. And then typically people will then say, you know, if we're on a 5 scale, you know, we're currently tracking at 3.2, you know, last month we're at 3.1. That's a very common approach. Simon mentioned something called NPS, not Net Promoter Score, or another one that's used a lot. I'll perhaps talk about that a bit more later on. Customer Effort Score, smileys using a pictorial description, sometimes in combination with the other ones above, or sometimes on their own, you know, sort of red, amber, green, or shades of red and amber and green across smileys for people to click on. Some of you would have seen that, for example, you know, in things like airports, where it says, you know, are you green or red in terms of having gone through the security, that kind of thing, obviously in a sort of contact center feedback type environment. Percent positive responses, you know, lots of different ways of taking those metrics and then, you know, pulling the numbers together. And then, you know, how do you do that? Do you do that with a system that's fully integrated with your customer case system, your contact center system? Is it, you know, all driven and integrated from it? You know, do you trigger it from your customer interaction system and then it goes off into a different system? you know, to be managed and calculated and reported and so on? Or actually, do you have two completely different systems? You have a system that's dealing with your customer interactions, and then something separately, you know, decides that an appropriate trigger is gone and captures it, and the two are kept apart. And I think the other component, just to sort of finish on this one, really, is just thinking through customer complaints. You know, it's a customer complaint is kind of an interesting, if you like, piece of customer satisfaction, is somewhat separate. You know, in many organizations, there's a different sort of flow through and way it's handled. In many industries, actually, complaints are a key component that the regulator looks at and has specific requirements in terms of numbers and service levels and responsiveness and so on and so forth. I mean, you know, if you think of telecoms and rail and so on and so forth, some very specific things that the regulator puts in place and measures and holds vendors and organizations accountable for. But it is another form of customer survey, if you will, and customer feedback. So I think it's important not to completely forget about that when you're bringing all of this together. So I think, Lee, I think the plan is actually at this point that we would try a couple of the surveys, right? Is that right? A couple of the polls, yeah?
That's right. And you have the poll.
I think I have the thing. So with a bit of luck, this is going to stick up a poll on the screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, we can.
So this is just a couple of polls. It'll be great to get some feedback from the guys on the call here today and see how it's working for them. You know, in your part of the organization, what's the primary measure of customer satisfaction that you use to help you manage the contact center? So I mentioned a few of them, and you know, trying to give you some ideas of that. So we're just looking to see, you know, whether or not it's around that CSAT figure, that numeric score, the net promoter score, customer effort score. There's something else you guys doing. You don't measure them currently, or you're just not sure because that's not part of the business that you guys deal with. I think we're just about slowing down on the responses. Just give it a couple more seconds. Right, now I'm going to end the polling and then share the results. So again, hopefully that's come through there. So interestingly, and a little surprising in, if I'm honest about this, that CSAT has just pipped Net Promoter Score with about a 40% score for CSAT, 31% for Net Promoter Score, way ahead of the next one, Customer Effort Score or other metrics. There's about 6% of the respondents saying that they don't measure customer satisfaction currently, and about 7% not sure. It's not an area that they have specific responsibility for. Really interesting. Now, I think if I do relaunch polling, it's going to give me the next one. Yeah, I want to continue. Oh, no, I don't do that. I think I need to get rid of that and do the next one again. Let's see if I can do that. Here we go. Right. Hopefully this is showing number 2. So what about that customer satisfaction survey tool? You know, is it something that where you have all of your surveys directly integrated with your sort of contact center and customer interaction software? Do you have it triggered out of that, you know, in terms of, you know, we've just completed a survey, an interaction, we've just resolved an issue for the customer, and we then send out the survey, but actually then it comes back into a different tool for analysis and reporting and that kind of thing. You know, is it disconnected? You know, they're completely separate. There's no linkage between the two. You don't do them. Don't know. Not sure. Again, I'm just
I don't know if you've seen, just while people are answering that question, but what is your view on the customer effort score?
It's not
contact centers.
It is a good one. But it's not something I'm seeing very often, if I'm really honest. It's something that I think has come up more recently. I think if you look sort of historically, I'd say CSAT's been around longer, Net Promoter Score, you know, a little less long. Customer Effort Score is a little bit more recent in terms of something that people have started to look at, and there's quite a lot of work around, you know, make things easy, you know, that kind of thing, which obviously it plays into. I'm not actually seeing it used very much, if I'm really honest today. Whether it should be is perhaps a different conversation.
Yeah, of course.
hopefully, again, you're seeing the results here. So what we're seeing here is, most, 37% are saying it's not connected. We have very separate systems for the case management and the customer surveys, and they operate independently. And that, as you can understand how that works, but also some of the challenges that has about how you make it available and so on. We'll come back to that later on. Then the second largest response is around it's triggered out of the case system, but then a separate tool then gets kicked in after that. So that's the second one. Fully integrated, only 17%. So, think through the challenges of that with multiple systems and then getting that information available to things like agents and so on. And then the bottom ones, we don't do customer satisfaction, not sure. So hopefully some interesting insights there. So Lee, I'm just going to carry on though. So this was kind of my perspective, okay? So this was going to be about, Ian's view, if you like, of if I was starting from scratch, what would I look at? So I would definitely go for transaction, and I would combine that with periodic, so-called voice of the customer, so that I'm not just looking at, a combination of purely the service experience in the moment, but I'm also thinking about some of those other stakeholders in the organization I want to pull together. So perhaps that could go typically beyond maybe the contact center per se, but I think actually having those two things would be what I'd be looking at. If I had to choose one metric, I would absolutely go for Net Promoter Score. That would be the one I would start with. Integrated to me is the way to go, so that I can trigger my surveys at the right point. I can get the information back, and I can get it back into the system for my reporting. I can get it back into the system so that my agents, for example, can see the information so they know what's going on. And to me, that's a significant advantage. And I would actually, I like to think about customer complaints, if you like, as a special type of customer feedback. So I would use my same systems and my same approaches for that, perhaps with some tweaks around process and obviously metrics and service levels and so on associated with that. But I would bring that into my system. Again, I wouldn't have it separate. I wouldn't treat customer complaints separately from other feedback and indeed other interactions with customers. That's my take, Lee.
Great, thank you, and really interesting poll results, and we will share those, I think, afterwards as well. So Simon, back to you. What are the triggers that you have for sending out a customer survey? What is it that sparks that activity?
So the marketing guys still send their periodic one out that we spoke about, but what we've introduced is a transactional survey. So that goes out on 1 in every 3 customer interactions that we have. When that customer interaction is completed, the customer gets a link to a survey, a little email, a little link to a survey. We keep it deliberately fairly short and fairly simple. We didn't want it to be over heavy and onerous to put people off. So we asked basically 4 questions, and then the last question, the 5th question, is a free form text box, so customers can put whatever they want in. And basically the questions are fairly simple. They're were our agents knowledgeable and pleasant, that sort of thing? Were the updates to your case delivered in a timely manner? Were you satisfied with the resolution? And then we have the NPS score as the 4th question, and that's a key one for us. So the first 3 we monitor in the CSAT, so it's a 1 to 5 thing, and then the NPS is obviously the NPS score, the 0 to 10. And I think where, for me, as well as the NPS, where we get the gold nuggets, is the individual bits of feedback that people take the time to put a little bit of, could just be a couple of lines, it could be, it could be paragraphs, could be whatever the one. We get some fantastic feedback on that, genuinely positive. So it's not like just there for people to have a moan up. They can have a moan up if they want, and that's fine, we will address that. But a lot of it is just really positive, really, why don't you do this, have you thought about that? And we find that really, really valuable.
No, very good. And so you use CSAT and you use NPS. Do you use customer effort score, or are you thinking about it? Is it something that you're considering?
No, we don't use it currently. It's not something that I've considered, to be quite honest, but we're always open to new ways of feedback. Why not use as many of these as possible? We don't want to drown people in all these different methods to get some customer feedback, but I would be open to considering that, but we don't use it at the moment.
No, interesting. And so when you're looking at gathering this customer feedback and understanding customer satisfaction, how integrated is this for you guys? How integrated is that solution, that process?
It's all integrated, all within our customer management tool. Previously, we had, like a lot of other people on this call, we've had different tools, SurveyMonkey and all sorts of different things, but now it's completely integrated. We can monitor how many surveys are going out, how many are being completed, percentages, things like that. We've got dashboards, we've got, and this is live stuff coming in, so we're looking at this stuff daily. And all that, it's got the underneath it, it tells you what scores you're running at. We can look at scores over the month, over the week. Yeah, fully integrated, and it's a pleasure to use, to be honest. Yeah, much easier.
No, brilliant. And Ian, before I come back to you, we have had a question that's come in over the Q&A, and the question is, why do you prefer the NPS as a measure of CSAT? Simon, just very quickly, just interested in why NPS it seems to be the stronger metric for you guys to use.
Well, I think NPS is quite a flavour of the month type of one, if you want. Well, maybe the flavour of the month's not the way to use it, but it's widely recognised in business and industry. It's a great one to use. It's a good temperature check. So I mean, that's the one we've chosen to use.
Yeah, no, thank you, Simon. Thank you. Ian, back to you.
Just a comment on NPS. There's lots of academic literature about it. It started with some folks called Bain and Company and a guy called Reichelt originally, and a lot of the work that was done there was looking at NPS and the correlation of NPS to truly loyalty rather than satisfaction, but actually loyalty then driving those financial performance that we were mentioning before. So you can look at, there's a bunch of stuff that's been done subsequently where you can look at NPS scores and things like revenue growth rates, and that kind of thing. And so to me, it's probably the best out there for linking customer satisfaction or loyalty to the financial performance one. That's why I would choose it. Thanks, guys. I'm just going to go on to the next slide here, if it does what I'm supposed to. Right. So, final question, Lee, that you were asking us to address was around how to use customer feedback to drive business performance improvements. You've got to measure it if you're going to manage it. You probably heard that for many times. It's particularly linked to a very famous sort of business guru, a guy called Peter Drucker. But actually, I think that's actually not all of it. And you got a little bit of that flavor from Simon. It's not just about the number. For those of you who are not familiar with Net Promoter Score, a little graphic at the bottom there, describes how it works on that 0 to 10 scale and how it works. It's a tough score actually to do well on. Anyone who can get above 0 for a Net Promoter Score is doing well, and you get in the high positives, you're doing very, very well. If you think about how that scoring works and where you need to be in terms of the promoters and so on. And if you have done any survey, car hire, contact center, mobile phone, flight, whatever, if they've asked you, how likely it is to recommend, you are being NPS'd. That's what they're using it for. So just so everyone is very clear, almost certainly that's the case. And it's used by, it is the most widely used, and I think it's used by something like 80% of the Fortune 500, for example. So it's a major one that's out there. But it isn't just about the number. I mentioned before that there's some guys at Bain that started this, saying, look, anyone can measure their NPS score. Their view is that that's important, but it's not the only thing. The most important, and Simon kind of nailed this and teed this up beautifully for me, what's more powerful and required to get the real impact is to make use of the feedback from individual customers. And this comes from the head of the NPS practice at Bain & Co., as recently as July this year in Fortune magazine. So, I think that to me is, if you like, the thesis. The number's really, really important, but actually it's about, what do you do in addition to that to make it worthwhile. So this is kind of how I think about what I call the closed loop customer satisfaction process. First of all, we've got to get those surveys out there, those triggers we talked about before, integrated or otherwise, if you will, in terms of getting something out there to get you a survey that gets you the response. That's the first thing that you get back. And then you're going to calculate those metrics, NPS, CSAT, customer effort score, whatever it is. And that's sometimes about as far as people go. I've kind of ticked the box, I've done it. You know, that's it. I don't think that is. I think you need to take it much further than that. You've got to start collecting that free form feedback from the customers about what they think about, you know, the service, good, bad, or indifferent. And thinking about the follow-up. This could be, for example, you know, you've given us a low score. I want the manager to give this guy a call and figure out, you know, what's going on here. A, to get, you know, more information, but B, to kind of, you know, smooth some of the troubled waters, if you will. On the other side, it could be you've given us a really strong score. I want to perhaps pass that on to the team to say, job well done, guys, you know, really, really good news. Could be passing it on to the organization that does the references and the customer advocacy and so on, and saying, you know, really pleased that you're happy with us. You know, could we use you for a case study, you know, to help us sell more business, that kind of thing. So think about the follow-up activity, if you like, that comes out on the back of the responses, the comments, and the scores that you get out of that. That's the sort of second level. If you think about those metrics, you know, it's not about just a single number. You want to start thinking about, you know, down at the contact or the customer level. You know, you might want to segment that by your products or services or your agents, your teams, your channels. You know, are we getting better survey responses when they come through via the web, or when they call us, or over the WhatsApp channel? You know, we've got two teams, team A, team B. Team A seems to be doing much better. What's driving that? What about individual agents? If you can actually identify individual agents that have closed transactions, you know, how did they do as individual agents, but also how happy were their customers, for example? You know, on the assigning the follow-up, you know, get that additional insight, but also track the status. You know, it's all very well to saying, right, all the negative ones, I want someone to pick up and do something about it. If you have that integrated system, you can say, right, you know, I want Simon to make these 3 phone calls to these guys who aren't happy, and he has to close the loop, if you like, on that, and say that I have spoken to them. This is the feedback. You know, actually we got our wires crossed, and they were expecting me to do something and we didn't, and so on and so forth. So, you know, get that tracked status so that if you've got actions that come out of that you're tracking them and then completing them again within the system. So if you've got those metrics, make it available, make it visible. You know, how do you get that out to the organization, to your teams, to your agents? You know, when your agent is on the phone to a customer that they've has called in, say, the previous month, do they know that they had a really great experience last time, or conversely had a very poor experience? So they've got that context there that they're able to do something about. That the team leaders know that actually we've got a problem at the moment with this particular product, this particular service. You know, maybe there's been some problems with the upgrades or whatever, and it's causing lots of unhappy customers. We can do something about it if we're aware of it, you know, but you've got to make it available. You've got to make it visible. What about that feedback? Start to group it, you know, start to either do it manually or using things like machine learning. If you've got big data sets, get that additional insight from the follow-up activity that you've done. Start to get information together around, looks as if we've got some emerging themes here, guys. We have to do some stuff. We have to make that available, and then start to use that in our management reviews, our cadence of looking at the results and doing something about it. Don't just let stuff sit there. Actually turn it into the sort of action plans, your service improvement plans, identifying and fixing the root causes, and then go through that track, inspect, review. So to me, that's the closed loop, taking that information you get from the surveys and turning it actually into a business tool that helps you to drive service improvement. And you do all of that together, you have an incredibly powerful activity that can drive significant improvements in your contact center operations, and of course then in the customer experience and indeed customer satisfaction that you get out of the back of it.
Thank you, Ian. And so Simon, back to you. The question has to be asked. Have you got a closed loop process for customer satisfaction at Capita?
We have got the closed loop, and I'm delighted to see we do pretty much everything that Ian's just described on those slides. There's a couple of little things I think you know, these things are never end, and there's always more we want to do with it, and these still is more. But yeah, we've got a whole wrap around this process. You know, we want customers to understand it's not a tick box exercise. We are reading it. We are doing stuff with this information. And to be honest, a lot of it is absolute gold dust. It really is. And also we want our guys, our agents, our staff to understand we're collecting this, we're sharing that with those guys as well. So, you know, it's not top secret stuff. You know, we want to be, you know, driven by customer satisfaction. So the guys on the front line and everybody needs to understand, you know, what's going on, what we're asking our customers, and get into that customer mindset. And, you know, we're looking at employees to feed back into this as well. That's one of the other things that we're looking for. It's not just about customers. We've got team leads and above managers are looking at this probably daily, certainly weekly, and expected to do things with it. So to Ian's point, you know, anyone that scores us a 0 or 1, we want to be getting in touch with them and find out, oh, what did we do that was so bad that you scored us a 0, you know. And equally good feedback, we want to share that. We get customers naming individuals, so we want to, you know, share that. Everyone likes, you know, want to go home doing a nice job, don't you? So it's nice to have that feedback as well. So, you know, we're actively using this and we're doing a lot of work around it.
No, very good, and thank you for the next slide. I think that is going to nicely tee up my next question. So what have the results been that you've seen?
We've seen some really great results. So when a net promoter score is now running at 47, it's been bobbing in the mid 40s for the last few months. So we're really pleased with that. We've moved that up from +2 last year. And we, with the periodic surveys, we were pretty miffed because we thought, well, we're doing a better job than +2. That can't be right. We had a feeling our customers, you know, liked what we're doing. We had more to do. And this transactional based survey has, you know, confirmed customers generally like what we're doing. That's not to say there's not room for improvement. And that's shown in the score. There's no shortage of customers responding to the surveys, because at first I wasn't sure with doing the transactional, you know, we didn't want to spam people how much, you know, feedback would we get. We're running at around about a 9% response rate, and that stayed fairly steady for the last 6 months or so. We're thinking about maybe turning up. At the minute we send 1 in 3 surveys out, so we're toying with the idea of maybe making that 1 in 2, you know, just to increase it a little bit and get a little bit more feedback. But the best thing, we get around about a third of the people that leave individual comments. It's about a third of the people who fill in our surveys leave some individual, use the freeform text box, and it's really valuable. I would really recommend doing it.
Yeah, there's no doubt that verbatim feedback is where I think Ian said that's where the golden nuggets are.
Yep.
And I've got another question for you. With the kind of responses that you're getting, and I mean that's a fantastic response rate. What are you doing with that? What you're hearing? Have you made any particular changes within either your processes or even in the feedback process?
We've used loads of this feedback. So as I say, we introduced our new customer portal at the end of the year. We're already on our second iteration of the portal. We've used, you know, over 50, I think it is, of these customer feedbacks, and we thought that's a great idea. We've fed it back into our service improvement programs. We've looked at some of this great feedback, and we've changed little user journeys on the portal, made personalization a little bit better, and the overall journey. So lots of stuff in there. I mean, not everything is there to be. Sometimes you might think, well, you know, that's not something we want to implement, and you know, you've got to temper it that way. But a lot of it we are using and we are feeding back. And I did see a gentleman just ask a question of why we do only 1 in 3 rather than every customer transaction. And there's no real reason why we couldn't do every customer transaction. It's just we decided we didn't want to necessarily spam customers with this. We wanted to make it quite fresh and things like that. We're just sort of dipping our toe to how it goes. We may move on in time where we do a survey on every transaction, but at this moment in time we're not. We're also limiting it to, you can't get more than 1 survey a week. So if you do 10 transactions in a week, you're not going to get 10 surveys, you'll only get 1. So that's just our personal choice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you talked about, you touched on hearing more from employees. Is that an area of expansion for you?
Yeah, that's an area of expansion. We've recently introduced an employee feedback mechanism for our agents where they can, and that one's a smiley face one and a free text box as well. So we're just trying to get that off the ground. We haven't had huge amounts of feedback on that up to now, but we've had a reasonable amount, and we're trying to grow that and advertise that. And again, we've had some useful feedback on, from employees, a couple of ideas that have came out that we've actually introduced through our service improvements and mechanisms for the tooling that we use. We run in sprints and do improvements on it. So that's something we're touching on, and we're also considering targeted surveys now. We haven't done any as yet, but that's another area where we're thinking, you know, maybe just after an upgrade we might target certain groups of users and things like that. So we're just trying to understand how we can get some value out of that, really.
Yeah, good shout. So before we close, it's 3 minutes to. So before we close, Simon, one last piece of advice from you before I come to you, Ian, for your last golden nugget.
Well, I suppose I think you need to build a process around this. If you collect and survey, you do something with it. You need to make sure your staff are aware of that this is happening, and you need to communicate with your customers about what you're doing with it. And finally, don't ignore it and don't dismiss it.
Yeah, really importantly, don't ignore it and don't dismiss it. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Simon. Ian, your final word.
Yeah, I think, Leo, perhaps the way to wrap this up is just to kind of go through the questions and summarize them. So if we, you asked us 4 questions, if you like, and I think hopefully with a combination of what I've been talking to, and also with great input from Simon in terms of the real life stuff that he's been doing. So from my perspective, if you like, summarizing this, why does excellent customer service in the contact center, why does it really matter? To me, it's all about the pounds, all about the money. It's all about the revenue and the cost feeding through to profit, and how that then becomes obviously good experience for customers, good for employees, but also good for the shareholders at the end of the day. That's what drives it, and my perspective on that one. The second one was around that compelling customer experience, and I guess the thesis there was around it's about those best-in-class consumer experiences that set the expectations, whether that's B2C experience, B2B experience, but also the employee experience. So that's the second one, if you like, that was the thesis of today. The third we got into was then around, how do you measure, how do you track, and particularly in contact centers, and we got those really good poll results, which are interesting. I think, as you said, it's a really good idea, Lee. We'll include that in the pack that we send out to the attendees. Think about the triggers. You heard from Simon how they're doing that. Whether you do it every call, every third call, no more than once a week. Think about, not spamming your customers, for example. Transactional versus periodic, et cetera, et cetera. Think about the metrics you want to measure, 1 or more, and how do you do that? Net promoter score, effort score, et cetera. Think about your systems, and then, getting that information that you can then use to then drive through, and think about whether complaints effectively become a special case, if you like. But again, using the same kind of an approach and the same logic, because I think there's a lot of goodness there if you can do that. And then finally, I guess we just spent some time talking about using the customer feedback, to drive the business performance improvements. And I guess my point on that, and I think you heard it loud and clear from Simon as well, is the number's important, but it's not just about the number. It's about how you get the specific feedback from customers, and then use that, in your closed loop process to drive the service improvement. That's my wrap, Lee.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you so much, Simon, for joining us. Thank you, Ian, for joining us. Thank you to you for your participation as well. Really appreciate that. On the screen now, you can see the contact details for Ian and Simon. Should you have any more questions, we will have a look at the questions that have been raised during the call, during the last hour, excuse me, during the last hour, and we will try and come back to you. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
See you. Bye-bye.